Is it possible to debunk atheism? I don't really see how, since atheism isn't a positive assertion, but the religious are always trying to figure out how they can, right? They just do a really bad job of it, and I suspect that's what we're going to see again today. So hold on to your hats, because as always, this is going to get bumpy. Today, we're going to go have a look at a video on the channel ManyProphetsOneMessage, which claims to be able to debunk atheism in just 10 words. Yeah, I wouldn't be holding my breath either, but at least we can give them a chance to fail, because that's always what they do. They fail. But hey, we're here to give them the opportunity to prove us wrong. And that never happens, because these people aren't very good at this. So, can a Muslim prove that atheism is wrong in just 10 words? Yeah, let's find out.
The argument from dependency can be used to make an irrefutable case for God's existence.
Yeah, I wouldn't be holding my breath. The problem here, and this goes for all of these kinds of arguments, is that they only actually work if you accept the premise that there is a God or that this religion is true in the first place. This is, of course, why we see so many religious arguments that fall completely apart, because we don't accept their beliefs a priori like they do. It's also another way to know that these videos, they're not being made for us, because we don't accept the conclusions the way that those who already believe do. It's just so, in this case, Muslims can sit there and nod their heads because it makes sense to them, because they're buried so deeply in the theology that they can't see it any other way. Whether they like it or not, we are not at all like they are. And that's why they fail all the time. And that's kind of sad, isn't it?
It goes like this. Everything we observe in the known universe is dependent. When we say that something is dependent, we mean that its existence and the properties it has requires an explanation outside of itself. To argue otherwise is to imply that these things gave rise to themselves.
Which is, of course, stupid. But this is a prime example of the composition fallacy, wherein one infers that just because something is true of the parts of the whole, well, that must also make it true of the whole itself. And of course, this is just more evidence that the religious aren't at all concerned with the truth. After all, we've been pointing out all of these problems for many years, and they're still making the exact same mistakes. Either they don't care that they're being fallacious, or we get, duh, fallacy of what? Because these people just aren't that smart. These are not critical thinkers. These are not skilled, intelligent people. These are people who are desperately trying to reach an emotional conclusion, and we are not at all interested, because we care about the truth, the objective, the demonstrable truth. And maybe they ought to give that a shot. It can only help.
This is like saying that something both exists and does not exist at the same time, which is obviously an absurd proposition. A good example to help demonstrate this principle is a triangle. The triangle's property of the number of angles cannot vary. It can never be anything other than 3, because triangle means having 3 angles. So by its very definition, a triangle is a thing that has 3 angles. This property of having 3 angles is explained by the very existence of there being a triangle. By contrast, the triangle's property of colour can vary. Similarly, the lengths of its sides can also vary, as they can be longer or shorter. The size and colour of the triangle are properties that are not explained by the mere existence of the triangle. Hence, triangles in the physical world are dependent things, because we must look to an explanation that is external to the triangle in order to explain its existence.
Well, it's only dependent because we invented the thing. It wouldn't exist at all if humans hadn't come up with a name for it. There would still be things in nature that had a vaguely triangular shape, but they wouldn't be called triangles without us. Those objects would still exist and not be dependent in the same way that he's trying to describe. Without an intelligence to impose the definition of what a triangle is, this rock would still exist. It just wouldn't be called a triangle because the concept wouldn't be there. Now, what I suspect he's going to try to do here is insist that there is some intelligent mind out there somewhere that somehow conceptualizes everything into existence. He won't be able to prove any of that, but because he's starting with the emotionally comforting conclusion that he really wants to think is true, that his beliefs are already so because of course they are, and he's speaking to an audience that already believes the same thing, nobody in his audience is going to call him on it. Nobody but me. So, let's see where this goes.
If we apply these same principles to the universe, then we come to the conclusion that it is dependent, because it too has properties that could be different to how they currently are.
And how exactly do you know that? I'm not saying that you're wrong, but you've made a positive claim here, so it's up to you to back it up. How many other universes have you examined to see what the properties can actually be? Because if that number isn't significantly higher than 1, you don't have the slightest clue what the hell you're talking about. Where is your evidence that it could have been any different? I'll wait until you come up with some. It's going to be a long time. Because this whole thing is just based on his own ignorance. The guy making the video doesn't know anything, and his intended audience, well, they don't know anything either. So he can make all the bald assertions that he wants, and they'll never know any different. Because none of them actually care, do they?
For example, the number of stars and planets it contains. This raises the question, how did the universe come to be? What explains it? The explanation for the universe cannot be anything that is dependent.
Says who? Because if we go back to his previous example with the triangles, we've already established that the definition of triangles is dependent on intelligent minds like ours. But we're dependent, right? And that proves that it isn't necessarily the case. Dependent things can and demonstrably do make other dependent things. Of course, he's got a goal in mind here, one that he doesn't want to let us know about up front, and he's just trying to get to his God. Therefore, he'll just toss out a laundry list of untenable assertions that let him skip past rationality to get to the things that he desperately wants to believe are true. But are they? That's the question, and that's what he actually has to prove. Let's see if he can.
Otherwise, we end up in a situation where the explanation requires an explanation, which does not explain anything. Besides, trying to use something that requires an explanation to explain something that requires an explanation will never give us any answers, as it leads to an infinite regress of explanations, which is absurd.
Really? Prove it, because that's just another bald assertion on your part. It's why they arbitrarily declare their gods to be the origin point, just so they don't have to deal with the infinite regress, which may or may not even be a problem. It just doesn't make them happy, and this is how you know that they're not talking to us, because we'd actually point all of these things out. They don't actually care about the facts, only the fast track to their pre-existing beliefs and their emotional comfort. And when they address their videos to atheists, as a lot of them do, they don't actually want atheists to respond, because we just make them look bad. We make them look stupid, which of course, they are.
Think of a line of dominoes that goes on forever. You will never arrive at a point where they stop falling. We conclude that whatever explains the universe must itself be independent.
Forever isn't even a coherent concept in our reality. There is no forever. There is no eternity. It doesn't matter what you can imagine. It isn't real. just because an idea appeals to you on an emotional level, that doesn't make it so. This is a separate but related issue. They don't have a firm grasp on reality, do they? They don't understand what the universe is actually like. And a lot of them are terrified of science, if you notice. They're not after truth, they're after comfort, and for any wannabe rational thinkers out there, that's just pathetic. But then again, so too are the religious.
Now, not only does it have to be independent, it also has to be eternal. In fact, independent things are by their definition eternal.
Once again, so far as we know, eternal doesn't exist. We know absolutely nothing about what might lie beyond our universe, if in fact there is anything at all, so by all means, stop pretending that you do. Knowledge is demonstrable. You have to be able to back it up. You can't just pretend that because you thought a thing in your head, that somehow makes it true. You people are morons. These people are just parlaying ignorant wishful thinking in, well, it seems to me so. Therefore, if you're going to pretend to tell me what's really going on out there beyond our particular instantiation of space-time, I'm going to expect to see your relevant degrees, and good luck on that since they don't actually exist. And of course, I'll need to see your evidence, which, again, good luck because you don't have any. You are just a clueless boob with nothing to show for your empty, absurd ideas. But this isn't about truth, as I said. It's about coddling their pathetic, childish fifis, which is why this video isn't actually being made for atheists, who are going to have a lot of questions, even more than I'm asking here. But of course, they don't have any of those answers. This whole thing is for the religiously delusional who just want all of this to be true so they can get to the conclusions that they desperately want to reach for emotional reasons. And I'm sorry, but that's just not impressive. It makes you look like, well, the dumbasses that you are, and maybe you should knock that off.
If they're not eternal, then it means they have a beginning, and things with a beginning need an explanation. That is to say, they are dependent upon something external to explain why they came into being.
So what? Because there could be a long string of things that created each other, and that doesn't cause a problem. Well, it causes a problem for the religious because, as I said, they've got a goal in mind. They're not concerned with the truth because the only truth that we can come up with at the moment is that we just don't know. But that's not comforting enough, so they have to just shuck and jive until they can get to the religious answer that they're emotionally invested in. And that's why all of these videos end up the same way. They've all got a destination in mind. It's just that destination isn't rationally defensible, which is why they're using a whole lot of bald rationalizations, not rationality. It's important to make that distinction, and only atheists would do it because the religious just don't care.
So how does the Qur'an relate to all of this? The 112th chapter of the Qur'an defines this independent, eternal existence as Allah.
Who cares what your book of mythology says? I mean, other than you. What rational person cares? I don't think you're going to find any, because atheists aren't going to take any of that seriously, at least not until you can demonstrate, with evidence, that your book is actually valid. If you watch a lot of these kinds of videos, and we've watched a lot of them around here, you'll notice that they all have pretty much the same progression. It doesn't really matter what religion you're talking about, because they're all doing the exact same thing. They start off with claims made to appeal to the specific religious mindset, then they transition to a book says a thing, and that means they must have been right all along. Lather, rinse, repeat. Usually, the claims are so generic that you can find the same thing said virtually verbatim in all of these videos. It could have been a video about Christianity if you just substitute a Bible verse for the Qur'an, and hey, you're golden. It's the same thing because it's the same scam. They're all trying to appeal to the emotion of the believer. And I think they know that actual atheists would just look at this garbage and laugh. So, how about we do that? Just to get it out of our system.
Say he is Allah, the one. Allah is equal to all depend. He begets not, nor was he begotten. And there is none comparable to him. Allahus Samad, which means that Allah is He on whom all depend, highlights Allah's independence. And Lem Yelid wa Lem Yulad, which means He begets not, nor was He begotten, implies eternality. We can see that in less than 10 words, the Qur'an describes our Creator in a way that provides an irrefutable argument for His existence.
That's ridiculous. First off, you have to take the Qur'an seriously, something that atheists don't do. Again, not for us, it's for those already believing. It makes a bunch of religious assumptions that are simply not in evidence. Again, not for us, made for the people who believe it. Just because it says that Allah is real, that doesn't mean that Allah is real. That's a matter of faith, not fact. There are a bunch of books that say things about Harry Potter too. That doesn't mean that anybody ought to believe that any of it actually happened. So let's go back and look at what's going on here. They craft an argument, a bad argument, based on logical fallacies and wishful thinking. Then they pick a book that they like, which says the things that their argument was specifically crafted to address, and therefore, whatever it says in the book must be true because they cherry-picked ideas that make it look true to those who are already convinced that it's true. Really, are you really that dumb? Yeah, unfortunately they are.
Allah is the independent, eternal reality that explains the origin of life, the universe, and everything.
No, that's 42. Get it right.
Atheists might respond by claiming that the universe is eternal and therefore it does not require an explanation. This does not help them because an eternal universe still has certain properties that could be different to how they are.
I get tired of asking this, but how do you know that? Where is your evidence that any of that is true? Put up or shut up. But of course he can't, because this is just a claim aimed at getting him back to where he desperately wants to be for emotional reasons. And I'm sorry, but I don't give a crap about your emotions. That's a you problem, not a me problem. I'm interested in what you can demonstrate in objective reality. Go ahead. This ought to be good.
Therefore, there must be something external to the universe that explains its physical properties. Hence, even an eternal universe is dependent. To help illustrate this, let's take the example of an eternal red triangle.
Which doesn't exist. That's important because without something real to point to, you can just assign whatever characteristics you want, and there's no way to prove yourself right. And that is, after all, what they do with their farcical god. They just make things up because it makes them happy, but that doesn't make any of it true. However, let's see where he goes with this, because I predict it won't be anywhere remotely impressive. It never, ever is.
The fact that the triangle has existed forever does not stop it from requiring an explanation for why it's red and not another colour.
Why? Why does it require an explanation? Just because you want one, that doesn't mean that one has to exist. Just because you want one, that doesn't mean that you know what it is. I'd love to know why you people are as stupid as you are. That doesn't mean I'm going to get a comprehensible answer. Just because you want it, that doesn't mean you get it. That's just another stupid statement.
It does not matter whether the thing we are discussing is a triangle or universe. Nothing magically becomes independent just because it is eternal.
Like, your God. Even if it was real, which you haven't demonstrated, even if it was eternal, which you haven't demonstrated, that doesn't make it independent. Just because you want it, that doesn't mean that you get it. But that's really the argument that they're making, though. somewhere in their empty little skulls, they came up with the unjustified idea that they needed this all-powerful deity thing to explain everything because they just want explanations, whether or not they're true. So they just invented a magical man in the sky to explain everything, and here they are, centuries later, still trying to stuff their nonsensical deity into the hole that they've invented for themselves. These are not deep thinkers. These are not rational thinkers. If they were, we wouldn't still be laughing.
Another response that atheists might put forward is that science will eventually come up with an explanation that does not require God. This is actually not the case, as the argument from dependency is a metaphysical argument. Metaphysical arguments are based on first principles which transcends all science.
Then it's a completely nonsensical argument, because anything that deals with the actual universe, that is not, by definition, metaphysical. Whether anyone likes it or not, that kind of metaphysical thought is complete and utter bullshit. It's wishful thinking, and what he did right there is try to define his crazy ideas away from rational evaluation, because he said so. This is what the religious have been doing with their gods forever and ever and ever. It's why gods used to walk with man and contact them directly. And now the best thing they can manage is to put a vague picture of something on toast. Because somewhere along the lines, the religious realized that, holy crap, somebody might actually be able to put this stuff to the test and make them look bad. So they dug up the goalposts and they ran way the heck over there where they were safe from rational inquiry. And that's what all of this is about. It's all about protecting the theist fifis. And that's pretty damn pathetic when you think about it, right?
If you deny first principles, then it has logical implications that lead to a worldview based on absurdity.
No, it really doesn't. Absurd to you doesn't mean absurd to everyone else. Now, I'm not going to get into a long, drawn-out philosophical discussion here, but it's rather strange how a lot of philosophy starts to look an awful lot like religion, isn't it? It's people looking for answers that don't exist, so they just make something up, and when, if ever, those answers actually arrive, they're so emotionally wedded to their made-up nonsense that they'd rather stick to the things that they invented in their heads than move on to what actually seems to be true. The answers to questions posed by both is often, I don't know, and neither do you. Yet that doesn't make them happy, does it?
You can bring any scientific theory now or in the future, and this metaphysical argument will still be valid. Science can only refer to things that are dependent because it relies on observations. If you can observe something, then you are dealing with a dependent thing because it need not have existed, or could have existed in a different way, i.e., with potentially different properties.
And how do you know any of this? That's just an assertion, and you can't back any of it up. And this is why religion is so utterly unimpressive. It's noodling your navel and thinking you found a gem when really you've only come up with belly button lint. It's being really impressed with your own supposed intellect without demonstrably exercising any. And how sad is that?
One final challenge posed by atheists is to ask, why can't the eternal independent cause behind the universe be some blind unconscious process? Why should anyone believe that it has a will at all?
Why should anyone believe in an eternal, independent anything to begin with? You still haven't demonstrated that it's actually real. You've just gish-galloped your way all the way to your emotionally comforting goal without ever showing that any of it is reasonable, absent your religious beliefs to begin with. Because they're not talking to us at all. It's in the way that they talk. Why do atheists? It's not, why do you, but why do atheists? Because they're not talking to us. They're talking about us. They're making straw men of us. It's not hard to see if you just pay attention to the words coming out of their mouth. This is not how you begin a rational conversation. This is how you post a screed, and they don't care what we actually have to say because it won't agree with their stupid script running in their heads. We're not going to pay them, and ultimately, that's usually what this all comes down to. Let's not kid ourselves. That's something for the religious to do, because we're a whole lot better than that.
In response, simply put, since the universe could have been otherwise, then it stands to reason that a decision maker is required to determine its existence from non-existence, and decide which properties it has out of other possible properties. The ability to choose is the characteristic of a being that has a will and is fully conscious.
You still haven't demonstrated any of that, have you? Because these are all just assumptions built around the idea of getting to a conclusion that you already believe. That's inherently circular. But it doesn't really matter when you're going on fifis and faith and not on reality and reason. How you feel is irrelevant. What you want doesn't matter. What demonstrably is, what is defensible with evidence, that's what matters. And the religious, they have absolutely none of that. And they don't actually care about any of that. You know, if they wanted to be impressive, maybe they should go find some. I mean, really, it can only help.
This independent, eternal being that chose to create is whom we Muslims call Allah.
And who I call a figment of your imagination. I don't care what you want. I care what you can prove, and you people can't remotely prove anything. It's why it's so painfully simple to tear this entire video apart. Anybody could do it, but the Muslims, because they're not interested, are they? This wasn't aimed at us. It was aimed at the people who already believe it on faith. Because they don't care about anything else, do they? They just want to be happy, but only children want that, absent all ties to reality. Granted, there are a lot of children out there living eternally in adult bodies because they're not at all interested in actually being adults. And that's a you problem too. Maybe you should do something about that because I'm getting a headache just rolling my eyes back into the back of my skull all the time. Do everybody a favor and grow the hell up because I'm getting really sick and tired of listening to you. Anyway, what do you think? Because now I'm actually asking you what you think because I actually care. Was this anything that would convince an atheist? Let me know in the comments. Personally, I don't think this should impress anyone with an IQ above room temperature, which I think kind of explains a lot, doesn't it? But please, let me know how you saw it below, and I'll catch you next time.
Bum